From Atlanta, Georgia, welcome to Fearfully and Wonderfully Me, a podcast for women on leadership and life skills with Rhea Story. Rhea shares powerful life and leadership principles, helping you maximize your potential and become the woman God created you to be.
Hello, everyone. Today I'm sharing with you a lesson that comes from my brand new book, Achieve. Maximize Your Potential with 7 Keys to Unlock Success and Significance. This book actually is releasing just the first couple weeks of September. And I was working on, just the final proofreading and editing. And this lesson really just hits home because I think it's so important when we talk about increasing our influence with other people. We really have to stop and look at the relationships that are in our life, because those relationships either give us energy or they take energy from us. And, we had an episode a few weeks ago on toxic relationships. And I really dug into what made a relationship toxic and how to deal with it. So that's episode number 7 if you need to dig deeper into toxic relationships. But in general, how do the relationships in our life give us energy and help us increase our influence and be more successful? There's no doubt that the relationships and the connections in life can be positive or negative. But the type and quality of the relationships in your life are determined by your values, your thoughts, and your actions. And I know sometimes that's a tough pill to swallow. My husband Mac would call that leadership truth, where it stings a little bit if you're in a place where you don't have great relationships in your life. Then maybe it's a little difficult to hear that the quality of relationships in your life are determined by your values and your actions. But, it really comes down to, even if you find that that's a little bit of a painful truth, there should be some hope in there and some positive association in there, because that means you can change them. And this means you've got the power to make an improvement. So I want to dig into that just a little bit in this episode. At times you may not accept the responsibility because it's easier to blame external conditions instead of internal ones. But once we realize that our internal conditions affect our external circumstances, we've got the ability and the responsibility to make improvements. So, since you're listening to this episode and this podcast, I know that you want to make improvements in your life. I know you want your life to get better. Every single one of us want life to get better, and there's nothing wrong with that. The key is realizing that we have the power and the potential to do that. So there are 2 ways that we can increase our energy in relative to our relationships. The first one is develop high quality character ethic. And the second is intentionally develop high quality relationships and social connections. So developing character ethic, that's really where we work on our values, our intentional developing of our character. Our character is made up of the intangible things like our integrity. Do we keep our commitments that we make to others and to ourselves? Our attitude. Are we a positive person or a negative person? And our character is really made up of those values that make us who we are. And the second point that I talked about developing high quality relationships, is really where I want to focus on today. So, just like we have to say no to some opportunities in life in order to say yes to some other opportunities, we must be intentional about saying no to some relationships before we are in a good position to develop the right relationships. I've had many friends over the years who they kind of just would get in a relationship and they would realize that it wasn't the right relationship, but they don't want to be alone. I think a lot of us have that, where we don't necessarily think that this is the right person for us, but we don't want to break up with them because we don't want to be by ourselves. And so we just end up kind of staying there. But the problem is we may be missing out on other opportunities because we're involved with a wrong relationship or just not a great relationship. So, those opportunities and those relationships could apply on a personal level in a significant other or your close friends, but they also apply professionally. If you're in a job situation that's not a good relationship or a healthy environment, and you may be comfortable enough to stay there and not uncomfortable enough to leave until something better comes along, but you might be missing out on the something better because you're focused on just staying comfortable. So important to just make sure that we are saying no to the correct things so that we can say yes to the right things. And what I'm talking about here, it doesn't mean that we believe we are better than anyone. I don't believe I am better than anyone. None of us are perfect. We are all just, a work in progress. But I can love someone or care about someone or maybe just respect someone, but not want to spend time with them or not share the same values on which a good relationship should be based. So, for example, you might tell your teenager to stop being friends with one of their peers that you've heard is maybe using drugs. And it's easy to see when it's our teenager. And we tell them, give them the lecture about that person's a bad influence on you. Don't hang out with them. And it's so easy to see when it's someone else. It's more difficult to do in our own lives. But the principle is the same. The wrong relationships will always influence you in a negative way. The right relationships will always influence you in a positive way. Now, I mentioned your character determines the relationships and the quality of relationships because it determines the relationships that you value. For example, I don't have a whole lot of relationships in my life that are not value driven, focused on my personal mission. I have even people that I've known for years and years, but we just don't spend a whole lot of time in hanging out or, just doing those social activities that don't bring me personally much return for my time spent. And what I mean by that is, I'm on a mission. This studying and writing and reading about leadership and personal growth and development, and that's what I do almost the majority of the time outside of things like exercise or time spent with Mac. But those choices are right for me because of my values. I value being able to help others grow and do things like this podcast. And so I choose to value activities that take my mission forward instead of a whole lot of activities like shopping or hanging out with friends or headed out to the club on the weekends. Those are not high value activities for me based on my values. Now, they may be your values. I can't tell you what's right or wrong for your situation, but I will tell you that it's important to look at very carefully at what direction you want to go and say no to things that don't support that. There's a great quote by Kevin Eikenberry that talks about this. He says, "Look carefully at the closest associations in our life, for that is the direction you are heading." Your character determines the relationships you value, and your commitment to intentionally adopt the right values will help nurture those relationships. Who you are determines who you spend time with. As Jim Rohn says, you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So write down, if you're driving, don't write it down, but when you get to where you're going, take a moment here and write down who are the 5 people in your life that you choose to spend the most time with. Not necessarily your coworkers. They certainly can influence you, but you may or may not be choosing to spend discretionary time with them. So write down your list of 5, your inner circle, the people that you choose to spend your time with, your discretionary time, your time on the weekends or at nights. Write down the names of those people because these people are influencing you the most. And then ask yourself, how would you describe their lives? Are they positive people or negative people? Are they committed to personal growth like you are? How do they spend their spare time? And how do you feel when you're with them? Do you make better or worse choices when you're investing time with them? Are they helping bring you up, or are they pulling you back down? How are each of these people helping you grow in some way? Not everyone is going to help you grow in every dimension of life, but you may have someone that's a good friend to exercise with. That person helps keep you accountable with physical fitness. And you may have another friend or mentor that helps you grow professionally, or helps you grow your influence and leadership. So think about that. Who would be on your list of 5? And, are they helping you? And are you helping them? We want to be positive influences on them, just like we want them to be positive influences for us. Our relationships influence our energy, good or bad, and they ultimately determine some level of our success. So now that you've got your 5 and you've evaluated them, the question is, do you want to continue spending time with each of them? And should you? And if not, what type of person would you want to spend time with instead? And you may simply just need to travel in a different direction with regard to that relationship. It doesn't mean you have to stop caring about them. You may not even need to stop spending all your time with them, but maybe just minimize it if it's not the right place and the right amount of time relative to your goals. Those who are satisfied with average in life will want to keep you average. And your desire to grow and improve yourself will confuse them. Those people will continue to spend their time on activities that don't increase their value or take them forward in life. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you're a value-driven person, and your relationships should reflect that. People who are holding you back should no longer have a place in your life. I use the example of, after I left home at 19, my mom would come and visit. And I talked about this a little bit on our podcast episode on toxic relationships. But she was very negative. She didn't support me. She didn't endorse my decision to leave home. In fact, she kept telling me that I was going to hell for leaving, and that was not a good relationship in my life. And especially at that time when I was in such a state of just emotional upheaval. And I really just had to make a difficult decision and say, please don't come back. If you can't come back and support me, then I just don't need you in my life. It doesn't mean I don't love her, but it means the relationship wasn't positive and I needed to end it. And I did. Every single one of us have left behind people in order to continue moving forward in life. And it's really just an important point to be intentional about continuing to evaluate our relationships. It doesn't mean we don't love them, but it does mean that we maybe don't need to spend some of our precious, precious time with them. It's kind of like the unfollow button on Facebook. You certainly can unfollow. If someone is being negative on Facebook, you can stay friends on Facebook, but you can click unfollow, and then their negativity doesn't influence you. And it's kind of the same thing in life. It doesn't mean you have to terminate the relationship completely, but it does mean you unfollow them and stop allowing them to influence you in a negative way. Until next time.
Start increasing your influence and maximizing your potential with Ria's audiobooks. Available at audible.com, amazon.com, and iBooks. Please visit riastory.com to learn about Ria's books, resources, speaking, and training programs. Thanks for listening.